This is about childbearing during and after the recessions in the Nordic countries. So it's a comparison of all 5 Nordic countries, that means Denmark, Finland, Norway, Iceland, and so on. The background for that. So the Nordic countries are known for high employment, also high female employment, high fertility, and an income-related parental benefit. All together would actually make fertility very sensitive to economic development. So pro-cyclical development has been shown in some countries at least. Since the Great Recession, there's a dramatic decline in fertility in all Nordic countries. Finland is now lower than Germany, just to say one example. So the question is that fertility decline related to the Great Recession? But the Nordic countries are also a puzzle. The Great Recessions are not very strong in the Scandinavian countries, so it's a puzzle. The recent fertility decline in the Nordic countries is not very clearly tied to macroeconomic indicators, and there are some recent studies here. Also, one of our session chair just read it 2 days ago. And the Great Recession was not the first severe economic crisis in the Nordic countries. I just show examples with 2 macroeconomic indicators. First, the GDP in the Nordic countries, and the gray line shows where the economic crisis was, so in the 1990s, and where the one was in 2000. And as you can see, in the 1990s, you have Norway, for example, not having a very severe crisis, or no crisis at all in the GDP. In 2010, all countries had a drop in the GDP. We come to the unemployment rate, and it's even more varying. As you can see, in the 1990s, all Nordic countries had an increase, almost a doubling of their unemployment rate, and never returned to the values before 1990. But you can see that there was a great variation in how high the unemployment was and how quickly it rose. And in 2010, we also have, except for Norway, an increase in the unemployment rate in all countries. How about fertility? We see the same pattern, but we see a completely different reaction over the countries as far as the total fertility rate is concerned, especially in the 1990s, where Sweden, who didn't have the severest crisis, Finland was much larger, had a much more stronger decline in the total fertility rate, while Denmark, who had also very high unemployment, higher than Sweden, had an increase in the total fertility rate. In the 1990s, or in the 2010s, all Nordic countries have the same development. So what is behind that? We are looking at the changes in the childbearing risk in the 5 Nordic countries since 1987, and we compare the changes after the Great Recession with the reference year 2008 to the earlier recession year 1990. We use event history models, harmonized population register data, and calculate parity-specific fertility by calendar year and run separate models for each country. And for the cohorts, just to finish, it's from 1942 to 1999, the older and younger. Gunnar showed me something yesterday or so in that direction, similar data. What are the results? I first show the results for the first and for the second birth. And you always see the first birth here on the top. On the left side, we have the early crisis in the 1990s. On the right side, we have the crisis in the 2010. The first thing that is very obvious is that in 2010, the development in the countries was much more homogeneous than it is in 1990. The second thing that you see that the first birth risk were much stronger in the decline than the second birth risks, which is the lower graphs that you have. In fact, as far as second births are concerned, you even, except for Sweden and maybe Iceland, you even have a slight increase, despite the economic crisis following. But you have the decline in the first birth, again, the strongest decline you have in Iceland and in Norway, where Iceland had the strongest crisis in 2010 and Norway the weakest from the indicators that we have. So it's not quite clear what's going on. I summarize this just very briefly for So the recent decline is driven by the first birth and not by the second birth all over. The second one is Norway and Iceland had a stronger first birth risk decline in 2010 than in 1990, while Norway had practically no crisis as far as the unemployment is concerned, while Iceland had the strongest one as far as the GDP is concerned. Sweden, Denmark and Finland had weaker or no decline, despite some crisis and varying things. And for higher parities, Norway and Denmark had stronger declines in 2010 than in 1990, and the most important one, a very homogeneous development over the countries. I can tell you that I showed you first and second birth. We find the same for the third and for the fourth birth, but I'm not going into this. Since the results for first and second birth were different, we decided to also look at the age-specific rates, since the behavior of younger women is always different to the behavior of older women. And so we looked at those below 29 and those 30 years and above. So here are the results for the first birth. And again, we can see that there is a strong decline in the first birth for the ones under 30, that's above 9, but a homogeneous development, a greater homogeneous development in 2010. While in the 1990 crisis, we do not have a decline among the 30 plus women. We have rather increases, except for Sweden. And we have a slight decrease in 2010, so completely different here. How about the second birth? Again, the effect is not so strong, but there is a slight decline also for those below the age of 29. Among women aged 30 and above, we have a slight increase in the second birth, and it doesn't seem to have an effect as far as the crisis is concerned. Again, it's very similar when we go to higher education, to higher parities, and it's also very similar when we come to education, but I'm not showing that there are too many graphs to go back and forth, and they are more complicated and we would need more time. So the results by age group, there are stronger declines among the younger women, at least in the recent one, and a stronger decline in first birth risk in general in the 1990s. Again, we find the homogeneous development over even by age groups. And for women aged 30 and plus, there is an increase of stable behavior in the 1990s, except for Sweden, but Finland again had no decline, despite the fact that it had a much stronger severe crisis. And there is a stable development in 2010. How can we summarize that, and what kind of conclusions can we draw? And here are the conclusions. So very roughly, in 2010, the pattern is very similar, irrespective of the strength of the crisis. In Norway, we have the strongest effect, even though we have the least crisis, especially as unemployment is concerned. In the 1990s, we had different fertility consequences, although the crises were similar. Sweden and Finland, for example. So how can one interpret that? And I bring here 6 things with a question mark. The first one, 1990s, could we say that the crises were more national? So there was a greater causal variation for the crisis, while there was less a global market, so you didn't have the global crisis in the 1990s, even though the crisis came in Finland, for example, the breakdown of the Soviet Union, Sweden more an internal restructuring of the manufacturer. In the 1990s, you also didn't have a European Union, so that was only formed in 1992. Sweden and Finland were not members of the EU, Denmark was, but you didn't have Maastricht criteria yet at that time, so you had a greater leeway to actually react with your national policies or with deficit spending that you have under EU conditions. And then you had no smartphones for everyone, no Google or something like that, so you couldn't communicate that quickly in what is going on in other countries all over. In 2010, it seems to be different. There are more common causes. The the crisis was Lehman initiated, so it was perceived as a global crisis. There could have been a similar uncertainty perception of the global crisis, irrespective of how the national crisis was. That we don't know. And then there were also other national crises that were not covered by the global crisis and are not in the discussion. For example, that Norway was hit by an oil crisis, just together with that global crisis. So that could have affected the stronger reaction in Norway. Overall, we don't actually know what happened, but we just heard that Lars Dommermuth, who is one of the authors here, through there, they got a 10 million euro research project from the Nordic Council in 10 million. Yeah, here. 10 million Norwegian krona, which is also very much money, to study the effect and those questions. Why was there such a fertility reaction in the Nordic countries, despite the fact that there was so little in the economic crisis? Thank you. And this is just the acknowledgement. Okay, thanks very much.